theyeshiva.net.
Thank you so very much. Welcome, everybody. I first of all want to thank Rabbi and Rebbe in Levitin, senior and junior, and the entire leadership of Chabad here of Seattle and the state of Washington and all the 25 centers for this gracious honor and invitation to be able to address. A few moments ago, Rabbi Levitin Jr. told me he's worried the hall won't be filled up, but I see it looks like the standing room only, so we're good to go. Baruch Hashem. But there are a few seats in the front. If you want to take my seat, there's another 2 seats, so you don't have to stand. If you want to sit down, gesundheit. And I want to thank each and every one of you for gracing us here this evening for this special event, One People, One Heart, in tribute to the upcoming yahrzeit of the Lubavitcher Rebbe of blessed memory, and in tribute to the unique moments and era, milieu, in which the Jewish people stand today, as we heard a few moments ago from Rabbi Shalom Ber Levitin. I want to share with you, I know by Jews we don't make confessions. There was once a Jewish kid and a Christian kid, they were walking together. So the Christian boy tells the Jewish boy, you know, my priest knows everything that's going on in the life of the congregants. Your rabbi knows nothing. Jew says, yeah, you guys tell him everything. We don't have that tradition, right? Maybe for good reason, I don't know. But I'll make a little confession. Yeah, the Rebbetzin just introduced me, and she said that I had the merit of being one of the what was called the oral scribes of the Rebbe in the last years, because I was born in 1972. That's the year you came to Seattle, no? Okay. So I'm a baby. I was born together with Chabad of Seattle. Oh, there's a connection, wow. Okay. So, but the last few years, the Rebbe would have long fabrengens, long gatherings on Shabbat and holidays, and there were no recording devices. Everything had to be memorized. So already from 1950, really this begins with the Alter Rebbe, with the author of the Tanya, the founder of Chabad. There was a group of chayzrim, oral scribes, to memorize and transcribe all the talks. All the discourses that we have from the Alter Rebbe, the founder of Chabad, and or the successors, including the Rebbe, maybe 150 volumes, are mostly what was memorized and transcribed by the scribes who heard it all, because nothing was recorded besides what he said in the weekdays. But most of his addresses were on Shabbat and holidays. Now the Rebbe wouldn't speak for 20 minutes. He didn't give a rabbi sermon for 20 minutes, and half of it is jokes, and other half is stories. The rest you don't even want to record, etc. The Rebbe would rarely say a joke, and even stories very, very infrequent. These were long, profound addresses, talks. A fabrengen could go 3 hours, but it could also go 4 hours. There were fabrengens that went 6, 7, 8 hours, and there were those that went longer. And every talk was a spiritual bomb. These were profound dissertations, discourses on Kabbalah, Hasidic philosophy, Chabad spirituality, Rashi, Rambam, Zohar, Talmud, discussions in Jewish law, Jewish ethics, Jewish philosophy, profound Talmudic analysis, Jewish perspective, hashkafa, contemporary issues like education, outreach, the state of the Jewish people, the land of Israel, etc., etc. There were times I remember it was a holiday, let's say Shmini Atzeret, Simchas Torah were Thursday and Friday, and then came Shabbat. The Rebbe had 4 gatherings within 3 days. So you're dealing with when the holiday finished, you were dealing with 10, 15 hours of talks that had to be memorized. Now you don't even remember what your wife said 5 minutes ago to you, even though she wants you to remember. This was 15 hours of profound things, I never slept Saturday night, Mitzvah Shabbos. So how did I get this job? When I was 6 years old, the Rebbe would fabring very often on Shabbos, and my father, of blessed memory, were relatives of the Levitins. My father was an orphan at a very young age. His father was tortured by the communists and exiled to the Gulag. So Rabbi Levitin's grandfather and his uncles led him to the marriage. So the families were close. And my father would schlep me every Shabbos to the Fabrengen when I was 6. Fabrengen means gathering, where the Rebbe would speak in 770. Now, I was jealous of my friends because the Rebbe spoke Yiddish. I didn't understand a word he said. I was 6 years old. I was extremely envious of my friends who were fighting on Eastern Parkway, quarreling with each other and having fun on Saturday afternoon. And I was stuck there in a big, sweaty, hot shul with 5,000 men, listening to long, long discourses that I did not comprehend and fathom. So what do you do as a 6-year-old? This is before the diagnosis of ADD, ADHD, PDD. Then there was one diagnosis for everybody. It was called a frask, patch, 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 patch. 40% of us were cured. The other 60% are still in therapy, dealing with our diagnosis. But I could have had such a diagnosis probably. And so 770, which was the main synagogue of Chabad, that's where the Rebbe taught and worked, had pillars, a lot of beams. I would count the beams. It was a big, big hall. I would count the beams. I finished. The Rebbe was still talking. So there were hundreds of tile. It was made up of hundreds of thousands of tiles. Thank God whoever did it didn't know what he was doing. So no two tiles were symmetrical, literally. So I confess, in boredom, I would count the tiles to 1 by 2, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I became an expert on the structure of 770 Eastern Parkway. I knew exactly where it was asymmetrical, how many tiles. And I did this for a long time, but I finished. The Rebbe was still talking. So in complete desperation, you'll forgive me, the mischievous soul that I was, I took the tzitzis of the guy sitting near me and I tied it to the tzitzis of the person sitting near him. Now this already occupied a lot of time because I had to figure out a position. They shouldn't feel it. They shouldn't notice it. I had to do it very clandestinely, discreetly. It had to be done in a very, very strategic way. And I waited with bated breath till the Rebbe would finish his Fabrengen and these two gentlemen would try to go home and part ways. The zenith of my career came one Shabbos when I managed to tie the tzitzis of 4 men. And they lived on the 4 corners of Crown Heights, east, west, south, north. So I knew when they're going to try to part ways and go home, Third World War might break out, which was the objective and the mission. This was my sinister subconscious stuff coming up. I did it. Now, on Shabbos, you're not allowed to tie knots. You don't untie, you don't tie. It's one of the labors forbidden on Shabbos. Either I didn't know or I didn't want to know. I'm not sure which one that is, but whatever, I did it. And this was a very interesting activity for me. It kept me busy. It was extremely exciting, waiting for the response, seeing the feedback, them not having a clue what's going on. Why are they suddenly glued to another 3 people? Anyway, it was one Shabbos. I was in the middle of my mischievous, sinister work of my tzitzis campaign. The Rebbe would sit at a head table in the middle of 770, you may have seen videos, and there was an aisle in front of him. And I stood at the edge of that aisle, right, literally directly across from him, not too far. The Rebbe would speak with his hands under the table. Rarely did he take his hands out. His hands were always under the table. He would move his hands a lot. But most people didn't see it unless you were under the table. And as I'm doing my thing, and I really wasn't listening to what he was saying, suddenly I see that his hand came out from the table and he's pointing to somebody. And I could still visualize it with my eyes. And he takes his finger and he points it and nobody knows where it's going. And then it goes directly towards the person standing right in front of him, which was yours truly. And he's literally mamish like this, which was unusual. The Rebbe didn't speak to people while he was Fabrengen. He would speak to the crowd. There were thousands of people. But now suddenly, in the middle of a talk, unexpected, he took out his finger and he went like this. And I'm like, OMG. What's going to happen next? Like, maybe he's been watching all of this, because they always said the Rebbe had a very, very watchful eye, even if he didn't notice it. And is he going to call me out in public for tying people's tzitzis on Shabbos, which is both prohibited and also pretty insensitive and cruel and inhumane, and then maybe throw me out of this place forever? which would be a public humiliation in front of 5,000 people, which also is another problem, because once Chabad throws you out, right, where do you go after that? Like where do you go to Satmar, to Neturei Karta? Like, where do you go after Chabad? Right? So I did not know what's coming. What is he going to ask me in the middle of the talk? He's probably going to call me out, like, why don't you listen? Maybe you should go play with your friends. This is not a place. It was very, very perplexing. But then I saw that he broke out in a smile. So he obviously wasn't upset. And then he asked me a question in Yiddish in front of the entire crowd, and I could still see it with my eyes and hear it in my imagination with my ears. As he's pointing at me, his finger was shaking a little bit. He asked me in Yiddish, and I'll tell you the exact words in Yiddish. Von wanneer weißt du, as da Welt? How do you know that the universe exists? I was completely dumbfounded. How do I know that the universe exists? How does anybody know that the universe exists? I mean, how do I know that I'm alive? How do I know that I'm in Seattle? How do I know that I'm breathing? How do I know that you're sitting here? I mean, how do we know anything? And he waited for an answer, and this was with a big smile. I did not expect this. How do I know the universe existed? And I did not know what to answer. I wasn't sure. Like, I don't know. I didn't study philosophy in Harvard or comparative religion or theology. And the Rebbe waited. He waited maybe 10 or 15 seconds, which to me seemed like 1,000 years. I could see and feel 5,000 faces literally gazing at me. I must have turned white and pale and yellow and red and blue and purple or whatever, any color. All I can think is, Lubavitcher Rebbe, live and let live. I didn't disturb you in the middle of your talk. Why would you disturb me in the middle of my tzitzis campaign? You're doing well, I'm doing well. Let's continue. I'm not bothering you, don't bother me. Like, did this really have to happen right now, right here? I thought this, I didn't say it. The Rebbe was waiting for an answer. Everybody's staring. I really didn't know what to say, so I just was quiet. Just keep it safe. I was quiet. And after this short time, the Rebbe broke out yet in a bigger smile, and he decided he's going to answer the question for me. And the Rebbe spoke in Yiddish, and he said, Entweder, so this child answers, you know how I know the world exists? I know that the universe exists because the opening verse in the entire Torah, Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, reads, Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. In the beginning, God created heaven and earth. That's how he knows that the world exists. The Torah says so in the opening verse. God created the world. If the Torah says so, got to be true. There must be a world out there. And he went on to his talk. I was relieved that he did not mention tzitzis. He did not mention beams or tiles. Next week, next Shabbos, I was afraid he's going to ask me another question. And I'm going to be caught again with my whatever down. So I decided I'm going to listen. Because I wasn't listening to Shabbos before. I'm going to listen. So that if he asks me a question from the context of what he's talking about, maybe I'll have a good answer. Because I understood he was talking about some subject. And he was continuing the subject by asking that question. So I started to listen next Shabbos. And that's when I started to listen. And a little bit I absorbed. And the more I listened, the more I understood, the more I was enriched, the more I was absorbed, the more I connected emotionally, spiritually, experientially, and intellectually to the wisdom. And today I have that privilege, the privilege of traveling the world over and sharing some of that brilliant, fantastic, profound wisdom, Weltanschauung, world outlook of the Rebbe, with Jews and sometimes not Jewish audiences the world over. But when I grew up, I thought about this and I realized, wow, that's how you educate a child. Instead of talking to me about what I have been doing wrong, he said, why don't you think about how you know the world was created? Why don't you think about that? And he gave that answer, which perhaps was a very subtle message, that wherever you go, always help people see the world from the Torah's perspective. Always help people anchor themselves in that first verse. In the beginning, God created heaven and earth. We're not random creatures. We're not just, a speck of dust, infinitesimal and valueless at the surface of infinity. the result of 26 billion years of random, mindless mutations. We were conceived in love. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And when I went back to that talk years later to see what was happening, I realized that Rebbe was saying that there's two ways of looking at the world. One is looking at the world from outside in, meaning looking at the world simply from a very physical perspective, what I see and feel at the moment. And one is the ability to perceive reality from a deeper place, to be able to feel the consciousness that pervades the universe, that vibrates through every atom and every cell, every organism, every gene, every drop of water, every star, black hole, every turtle, from the smallest to the largest, everything vibrates with divine energy. In the beginning, God created heaven and earth. So, they tell a story that once, when Golda Meir became the Prime Minister of Israel, Henry Kissinger, you remember Henry Kissinger? He died a year ago or 2 years ago. He was the Secretary of State of the US. So she wrote him a letter and she said, Mr. Kissinger, I am so happy to be Prime Minister of Israel when you're Secretary of State. I know now Israel and America will finally have a good working relationship. Kissinger was a real German Yekish, a Jew. And he writes back to Golda Meir and he says, thank you, but you must remember my priorities. Number one, I am an American citizen. I'm not an Israeli. Number two, I am Secretary of State of the US. I am not Foreign Minister of Israel. Number three, I'm Jewish. That's number three. She writes back, she says, that's great news, Mr. Kissinger. I am so happy about this because in Israel, we read from right to left. There's always two ways of looking at the universe. And in this evening's presentation, what I would like to do with the grace of God, and I ask Hashem to allow me to be a channel for His infinite wisdom and the wisdom of Torah, is to really be able to communicate some of the Rebbe's perspectives on the era we live in. Although the Rebbe passed away 31 years, it's going to be 31 years. Nonetheless, with tzaddikim, sometimes the Talmud says it takes 40 years to really understand your teacher. When you have a great teacher, it takes 40 years to understand. And I see it viscerally in my own life. I heard a lot of talks from the Rebbe. I thought I understood some of them at least. I wrote them, on my own level. It's now, some of them 40 years later, 35 years later, 38 years later, 45 years later. And there's a new depth that I perceive. The Baal Shem Tov once wrote a letter, and his brother-in-law said, I don't understand, when you wrote the letter about the story, it didn't happen yet. So the Baal Shem Tov wrote him, Baal Shem Tov should have gotten the Nobel Prize. The Baal Shem Tov said, time is relative. Time changes. In a higher world, 15 years happen in one day. It's a different speed of time. Things travel differently. So sometimes a teacher has a vision. The Rebbe said things. 30 years later, you understand. 40 years later, you understand. I remember when the Rebbe said those things. Not everybody understood, including myself. Now it's a few decades later, and I go back to those very same talks that I had the merit of remembering, of transcribing, of giving over. And I'm like, wow, And it's incredibly relevant and powerful. Wow. It's a merit, a privilege to be able to learn this, to be able to see this, because it allows you to live life with a different luster, with a different depth. As they say, to suck the marrow out of life. It's very difficult to understand the Lubavitcher Rebbe and his contribution if you're not comfortable with the concept of paradox. The concept of paradox was at the core of all of the Rebbe's talks. Now, people don't like paradox. Why? We like controlling things. Paradoxes you can't control because they don't make sense. We love when things make sense. You know why? Because we like controlling things. And we want to remain small, safe, and in control. And if I could make sense out of my life, I think I could control my life. That's why marriage is hard for so many people. They like to control. Now, if you're married to a Jewish woman, good luck. She's going to crack you open. And if you're married to a Jewish man, he'll probably crack you open if you allow yourself to be cracked open. But that's the purpose of marriage, to allow yourself to be cracked open, which means the ego, the insecurity. Paradox is really letting go and letting God. Paradox is understanding that logic itself was created. In the ancient modalities of science, there was no room for paradox. Things had to be predictable, explained, articulated in a way that we can integrate intellectually. Once the world of quantum mechanics emerged in the lifetime of the Rebbe, especially in the 1930s and in the decades subsequent to it, the Rebbe often made reference to it because in his own Kabbalistic and Hasidic works, paradox is at the core. Everybody knows once you touch the layers of quantum mechanics, rationality goes out the window. If you try to use your rational brain to understand physics today, it's a lost case. It's impossible. You let go. You understand that paradox is more real than non-paradox. On subatomic levels, on the subatomic particles, on those levels, those strata of existence, particles could move clockwise and counterclockwise simultaneously. Light can be both a particle and a wave simultaneously. Schrodinger's cat can be dead and alive simultaneously. Paradox doesn't come. I once read in the New York Times, I don't know if we're still allowed to mention that newspaper, but Stephen Hawkins, they were writing about quantum mechanics. They said that Stephen Hawkins said, if you talk to me about quantum mechanics, I open the drawer and I take out a gun because I cannot deal with it. My mind has to shut down. In Kabbalah, however, paradox is inherent. Paradox is at the core of everything. One of the most powerful features of the Rebbe's talks and perspective was it included paradox. And it demands always surrender and an altered state of consciousness, opening up yourself to what he called Ein Sof, infinity. One of the first basic paradoxes in the Rebbe's teachings was, I've probably never met an individual who put so much focus on cherishing the individual. He loved quoting the statement of the Mishnah, every person ought to say, for me, the world was created. B'shvili nivra ha'olam, Sanhedrin 38. It sounds like narcissism. I say, for me, the world was created. Then my wife says, for her, the world was created. And then my mother-in-law says, no, you both got it wrong. The world was created for me. So everybody says that. But for the Rebbe, this was a very deep truth because what it meant was that there's something at stake in your life that is vital. You are an indispensable note in the cosmic symphony. There's something you have to contribute that nobody before you or after you in all of history, including the greatest of the great, could contribute. Rarely do you find in history a Jewish leader who truly believed it. He didn't preach it. You could see it. He embodied it. He believed it. He believed that individuals are not only precious and valuable, but everyone is priceless, and not only because they're part of the collective, but as an individual, you have a light to shine that nobody else could shine, and if I don't shine it and you don't shine it, the world will be missing something in a very, very real way. God himself, so to speak, would be missing it. God himself craves it and wants it. L'maaseh yadecha tichsav. On one hand. On the other hand, it's very hard to find a Jewish leader who literally saw the entire people of Israel as one cohesive, unified entity. Like one person with one heart. Ki ish echad b'lev echad. And actually, in one talk, he addressed it in a beautiful, beautiful way. And on the plane, I realized that it was a talk this week, Parshat Bahaloscha, the week of the portion of Bahaloscha. The portion of Bahaloscha opens up with a paradox. God tells Moses, tell your brother Aaron that he should kindle the 7 branches of the candelabra. Every day in the holy temple, the priest kindled the menorah, which we commemorate, of course, on Hanukkah. 7 branches, not 8. Every single evening he lit the menorah. Ba'aloschas haneres. And then the Torah continues, but let me tell you how to make the menorah. How to make the menorah is miksha achas. You make it out of one piece of gold. Don't weld different pieces together. Take one piece of gold and hammer it out, which is very complex. To take one large goblet of gold and hammer it out into 7 branches with an intricate design. Miksha, but that's how it was made. And the Rebbe asked, the design of the menorah is already discussed in the book of Exodus. Here you're discussing the kindling of the menorah. Why are we going back to the construction? And his answer was profound. He said, when you have 7 branches, it means you have 7 different flames. The reason you have 7 different flames is because there's 7 different types of souls. Every person falls into a different category. There are souls of kindness. There are souls that are more oriented to discipline. There are souls that are oriented towards empathy, souls that are oriented towards ambition, souls that are oriented towards submission, souls that are oriented towards bonding, and souls that are oriented towards leadership. Kabbalistically, it's called Chesed, Gvura, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, Malchus. If you don't understand what I'm talking about, it's fine, I also don't. Seven different candles. Every flame has its own unique flicker. And yet they're all part of one menorah. How do you do that? How do we manage both being different and being unified at the same time? And the answer is because it comes from one mixture, one piece of gold. If our individuality would stem from our differences, it would be a problem. Our individuality stems from unity. From infinity, you can have both oneness and individuation together, because infinity could work with paradox. On one hand, we are all one. There is a space in which there is complete oneness, complete coherence. There's a frequency of oneness that vibrates through the Jewish people. We don't always see it. You know who sees it? Our enemies. Our enemies see it very, very clearly. When Dr. Mengele stood in Auschwitz, he didn't look at you and say, what do you believe? Do you believe this philosophy or that philosophy? Hamas gleefully celebrates the death and murder of every single type of Jew. In fact, the Jews living in the South, some of them were the most left-wing, peace-loving, Gaza-loving Jews. I visited a woman there. She told me that she was one of the people who would go to Gaza and transport patients that needed treatment to Israel, to hospitals. Back and forth, showing so much compassion and love. She and her family and her community were attacked, wiped out. They don't care. You could call yourself left-wing, atheistic, radically humanistic. You're a Jew. It's hard for us sometimes to see that. For the Rebbe, it was very, very obvious. On one hand, we are one collective whole, one person with one heart, which means one heartbeat. There's a heartbeat called the collective consciousness of the Jewish people. On the other hand, this one mixture is branched out. It's hammered out into different branches, into different flames, into different radiances, and the two are not a contradiction at all. Because once you understand what individuality really is, it's your own manifestation of the light of oneness. You could be one and unique at the same time. It's what a successful marriage looks like. What's a successful marriage? A successful marriage is not about one swallowing up the other and two people becoming one where they obliterate their differences. Or like a woman said, before I was married, I was incomplete. Now I'm married and I'm finished. It was like this guy from one of the phones, and it was AT&T or T&D, whatever. He comes to a house and he knocks, rings the bell. The guy comes and says, "What do you want?" He says, "I'm looking for the master of the home. I have a great deal. I'm looking for..." The husband says, "You came at the right time. Wait 5 minutes because this exact question is being debated right now in the kitchen." But on the other hand, if it's just individual, I am I and you are you, that's not what a marriage is. That's why so many marriages struggle. It's that balance, that paradox balance, that actually the more you're one, the more you can also be distinct. And the more distinct you are, the more one you can be, because your distinctiveness is not a form of selfishness. It's a distinctiveness in which you humbly acknowledge the fact that God needs to shine a specific light through you, through me. Your distinctiveness is not narcissistic. Your distinctiveness is your contribution, your unique contribution to the state of reality, and therefore it never undermines oneness. That's what a blissful marriage looks like. For the Rebbe, this was the reality of the Jewish people. Be you in the deepest and most real way. Never compromise on that. Everybody needs to learn to truly respect their own life force and energy. You cannot respect... My son was in a particular yeshiva. He didn't like it, so he wanted to go to another yeshiva. So I put him in another yeshiva, and he loved it. I asked him, I said, "Gershon, what's the difference between this yeshiva and that yeshiva?" He said something pretty sharp. These kids are sharp today. 17 going on 95. He says, "In one of the schools, they taught me to hate myself. In the other one, they taught me to love myself. I said, what do you mean? Somebody told you to hate yourself? He said, no, but in one, the message was that you'll never be enough. You always have to be something. You always are catching up. In the other one, the message was you are essentially as perfect as can be. Now, why don't you live out your potential? Right? Such a profound observation. When a person doesn't really, really, truly respect their own inner life force and energy, we can't really connect with other people. We can't. When people give you advice and say, just be selfless and love your husband, love your wife, it's beautiful advice. But I have found the more you really trust yourself, the more you can trust God, the more you can trust others. The more you love yourself in a real way, the more you can love others, the more you can love God. Because if myself is just a shmata, it's just valueless and inconsequential and worthless and meaningless, the very fact that you love me, I can't even trust because you're loving a shmata. So that itself becomes the source of the problem. So this duality, which seems like paradoxical, was essential to the way the Rebbe saw things. And then came something else. And that is, are the Jews parochial or are we universal? Do we believe in tikkun olam, or do we believe just in creating our own Jewish hub and doing our own thing like eating kugel and some kishken, some sushi, what are the new Jewish foods? Sushi, Chinese food, whatever it is. Jews have been arguing about this since time immemorial. Some Jews say we're parochial. Let's just keep it in our own circles, educate our kids, hatch them, match them, dispatch them. So that's it. Invite me for the bar mitzvah, invite me for the wedding, invite me for the Sheva brachas, that's it. And others say, no, come on, tikkun olam. We're stewards of the world, we're responsible for the world. I don't know if it'll be easy to find a Jewish leader like the Rebbe who spoke so much about Jews embracing what it means to be a Jew. There was a woman I knew, and she was a young secular Jew who grew up in Pittsburgh, the place of remember the Pittsburgh platform, that's where the whole Reform Constitution was developed in the late 1800s. And she grew up, Rodev Shalom, you come to synagogue Yom Kippur once a year, etc. You support Israel, very, very secular. She ended up meeting the Rebbe in the early 1970s. He was addressing women, and she went over afterwards, and she asked the Rebbe asked her, what brings you here? And she said, they said that I should come visit you, but I don't believe in you. I think you're like the other gurus in India who just want attention and money. I don't believe in you. And I don't believe anything they say about you. The woman told me this story, and she said the Rebbe just started to laugh. It was almost like he appreciated somebody, like busting. He started to laugh, and he said, so why are you here? She said, they said I should come. He says, okay. So he said, once I'm here, I'll ask you advice. He's okay, what's your question? She says, I have a question. Should I go study psychology or should I go study pottery? And the Rebbe says to her, I think they're both amazing ideas. Psychology is great, pottery is great, but I have a third idea. Why don't you go find out what it means to be a Jew? And she listened. I know this story because this is my mother-in-law. So her whole life was transformed. The Rebbe understood very well that the code of Jewish law, Torah, and mitzvahs is the unique heritage of the Jewish people. And yet he refused to just reduce the Jewish people to a parochial tribe, living in our own orbit, doing our own thing. For the Rebbe, the vision was l'sakin olam b'malchus shin daled yud, to change the entire world. And many Jews see it as a paradox. How can we do that? But for the Rebbe, it was the other way around. The more you are steeped in your Jewishness, the broader your message, the more powerful your message. It's exactly like a shofar. You remember the shofar? I never understood why we blow shofar from the narrow side. Did you ever notice that? So I decided I'm going to blow shofar from the wide side. So I turned the shofar around, and I took the broad side of the shofar, and I put it in my mouth. And you know what it sounded like? And then I took the narrow side, and I started to blow. And then it hit me. There are Jews who say we blow shofar from the broad side. We're broad. We're universal. We don't have time for Jewish rituals. We're not into that. We think about the world. So they blow shofar from the broad side, but nobody can hear what they're saying. But when you blow shofar from the narrow side, meaning you're etched in your own unique identity, in your own unique life force and energy, in the Jewish consciousness, then you actually make a contribution. Your voice can be heard broadly, wide, and far. For Jews, this was hard because we came to America, and it seemed like integration happened like never before in exile. And it did. The hospitality that America gave to the Jewish people was unprecedented in our long exile. I mean, Sam Levinson says, the comedian, he said, my father came here because they told him it's the golden Medina, the golden country. He said, what does that mean? They said the streets of the United States are paved with gold. And then he came here and he realized three things. First of all, the streets were not paved with gold. Second of all, the streets were not paved at all. Third of all, he's the one who has to pave them. Okay, rude awakening. October 7th caught so many American Jews by surprise. We were certain that our universities and all of the organizations that support minorities and human rights would be the first ones to scream and protest. Those who spoke for years about microaggressions, about creating safe spaces in schools and universities so that a student even thinks that he's being insulted. He can already rebuke you and you'll lose your tenure for 20 centuries. When women are tortured, children burnt alive, they'll all come out and protest. And yet, not only did nobody support Israel, they supported Hamas. And our elite universities, Jewish parents dreamt of sending their kids to Harvard University. Remember? Columbia University. It was there a nachas for a Jewish mom living in 1949 in America than saying, my son is in Harvard. Wow, it's greater than Rabbi Akiva. King David wasn't in Harvard. I mean, King Solomon, even Moses, okay, he was by Pharaoh, but not Harvard. $400,000 they dished out to get your kids through a university where it turns out they don't know the difference between Hitler and Churchill, between Hamas and Israel. Jews said, Hazos Nami? Is this the great liberal, progressive, academic, elite institutions for which we gave so much money and charity and resources? And it reminded all of us that if we don't blow the narrow side of the shofar, not only will our voice not be heard, but we have literally nothing to trust and rely on. And yet the Rebbe would never allow this idea of complete isolationism, just spit at the world and retreat into your own little hub and do your own thing. On the contrary, the more you're Jewish, like Abraham, the more all the nations of the world will be blessed by you. It's fascinating, you know, if you ever come into a synagogue, you'll notice that they have to count if there's 10 people for a minyan. You know, we never count Jews. You ever notice? You ever notice your Chabad rabbi and his Chabad never goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You ever saw? He goes not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4. Or if he's hungry, he goes Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Olam Hamotzi Lechem Min Haaretz. Or Hoshia Es Hamecha Baruch Nachlasecha. The other day there was a Chabad rabbi. It was Friday night. He didn't have a minyan, so he needed a 10th guy. So he goes out to the street and he sees somebody who had a Jewish nose and he says, "Could you come in for 10 minutes for the prayers? We'll do it very, very, very fast and leave." He says, "Sorry, I don't believe in organized religion." Thank God this Chabad rabbi did not have an English education. He did not know what organized religion means. So he looks at the guy, he says, "Tell me, do I look organized? I don't have an organized religion." And you know what? The guy came in, he had his minyan. Indeed, not organized. We don't count Jews. Why do we count Jews? Because God told Moses, when you count Jews, it's not good. You want to count Jews? Let them all give a contribution. Zeh yitnu. And count the coins. And that's how we do it till today. It's one way of getting money out of Jews. We have to make a census. But what's this idea? Why can't you count Jews? What's the big deal? God says there'll be a plague. It's really not a good idea. What's the big deal? Why can't we count Jews? Till today, nobody counts Jews. You don't go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's why Jews get very complicated when they go to restaurants and concerts and shows. They want to count how many people there are. But they can't. So they start doing this 25 cheers and everybody paid $22. You know how it is. I'm not going to do the whole routine of my friend Jackie Mason, who repeats many of my jokes, but you get the point. My friends, there's a deep, deep message. I heard this, I think, from Rabbi Jonathan Sachs of blessed memory, the chief rabbi of Britain, or read it. And he said, you know, why do we take a census? Why do we count? We count because counting is a way of flexing your muscle. When a country takes a census and America says we have 350 million people, that's power. When an army says we have 1 million troops, it's power. When Microsoft tells us they have how many employees today? Rabbi Farkash. What's the truth? Okay, whatever it is, 12,000, 15,000, 18,000, it's impressive. We take a census in order to demonstrate power. God tells Moses, don't count Jews ever. You know why? If Jews are ever going to count themselves, they're going to go into a deep depression. Ki atam ma'at. We are such a small people. There are 14 or 15 million Jews, which means we don't even constitute 1/4 of 1% of humanity. People don't realize that. We don't constitute 1%, 0.5%. We don't even constitute 1/4 of 1% of humanity. It's fascinating. Jews are smaller than a statistical error on a Chinese census. Yes, that's a fact. Think about it and explain it to your husband because he's fluffing. Explain to him what the statistical error on a Chinese census is and do it in his ribs. It's fascinating. It's incredible. We have 2.6 billion Catholics, 1.9 billion Muslims, 1.2 billion Chinese. As I'm talking, another million were born. They're having a Shalom Zacha this week. And Jews were like fighting for every soul. People don't realize this. And yet we occupy the headlines in every newspaper and website. You would think Israel is the size of Russia. You wouldn't realize that Israel is the size of Dallas International Airport, for heaven's sake. It's the size of New Jersey. It's like a match on a football field. 14 million people, it's incredible. If Jews would look at their numbers, they would fall into a despair. How are we supposed to survive? We don't even have our own hub. We're going to be exiled, persecuted, scattered all over the world, hunted down, genocide, pogroms, autodafes, holocausts, liquidations, October 7th. How could we survive? You want us to survive and even change the whole world? God says, don't count Jews. Never count Jews. You're going to reach the wrong conclusions. Zeyitnu. Count their contributions. If you want to understand the Jewish people, don't count their numbers. Count what they have given to human civilization over 3,337 years since the day we stood at Sinai. Whether it's in medicine, whether it's in biology, I'm not going to be like your Uncle Harry at Thanksgiving dinner who talks about how many Jews won Nobel Prizes. Every Jew I know has one Uncle Harry, big glasses, still reads the New York Daily News, and at Thanksgiving he has the statistics of how many Jews won Nobel Prizes. Well, I'm not your Uncle Harry, but I will do his part for a few seconds. And that is, the Nobel Prizes have been given for how many years? 150 years. Based on the percentage of Jews, I would expect a half a Jew should have gotten a Nobel Prize, not even 1/4 of a Jew. The fact is that in some areas, Jews have received 50, 40, or 30% of Nobel Prizes. Muslims received, I think, 4. And one of them, of course, was given to Yasser Arafat for peace. Isn't that great? The Chinese, 11. Judaism comes to sociology, economics, literature, peace, medicine, biology, psychology, incredible. 25%, 30%, 40%. You're talking about a nation that doesn't constitute 1/4 of 1%. How did that happen? And that's in the fields of sciences and humanities. You're talking about the world of spirituality. An endless stream of prophets and sages and kings and leaders and mystics and tzaddikim and Rebbes and Kabbalists. Men and women who brought so much morality and refinement and holiness and spirituality to the world. How does that happen? Somebody once said, there were 4 revolutions that shaped modern society. One was the revolution of socialism, created by Karl Marx. One was the revolution of psychology, created by Sigmund Freud, or his real name, Shlomo Freud. That was his name. One is the revolution in science, created by Professor Albert Einstein. And what was the revolution in biology, created by Charles Darwin? So you have Marx, Einstein, Freud, Darwin. They created the 4 greatest revolutions of the last century. 3 of them were Jewish. Darwin was wrong. So God... So God says, don't count Jews. Zeyitnu, count their contributions. And when you look at that, everything changes. Then they'll be able to know how to look at themselves. My students ask me, could you prove that the Torah is divine? And I believe one of the greatest proofs that every word of the Torah is divine is what happened in the world after October 7th, 2023. It did not make sense. In the Congo, close to 5 million people have been murdered in the last few years. Most people don't know that. In Chechnya, 200,000. In Syria, 600,000 by their own government, including through chemical warfare children. In Darfur, 4 million people killed, murdered, raped. Did you hear of one demonstration? In Columbia, Yale, Oxford, Harvard, Duke, one demonstration for the people of Darfur, for the people of Syria, for the people of Congo. 600,000 people in Syria. I didn't see one demonstration. And here, a tiny little country the size of Dallas Airport defends itself from a heinous mini Holocaust. When Hamas said, we'll do it again and again, with hostages in its tunnels, and the whole world protesting them, as though they're the most evil country in the world. Where do you make sense out of that? There's no greater proof, my dearest brothers and sisters, from this, that every word of the Torah is true. Than when the Torah says that God chose the Jewish people to represent Him in this world, to be the interlacing link between heaven and earth, to be the moral conscience of humanity, to be a light unto the nations. It is as authentic and true as it gets. In fact, October 12, 2023, there was a demonstration. NCU, North Carolina University, of course, pro-Hamas. There was a professor, a Jewish secular professor, who heard this. He went outside, he started to scream, Nazis, Nazis. The police had to take him away to protect him. And then when he came to his lecture that afternoon, a girl came over to him with a rose, and she says, I want to just appreciate and show you my gratitude for your protest against those Hamas supporters outside. And the professor was moved, and he says, you must be Jewish. He says, no, I'm a Christian. He says, so why do you care? She says, what do you mean? You're the chosen people. He looks at her and says, come on, you've been in my class for a long time. You know I don't believe any of that. She looked at him and says, you may not believe it, but we all know it. That truth that you see today comes to teach the Jewish people who we are. Some people doubt if we are the same Jews who left Egypt, who stood at Sinai, who coronated David and Solomon. Are we the same Jews who fought Haman? Are we the same Jews who fought the Syrians with the Hashmonaim and rededicated the Second Temple? Are we those Jews? Or no, we're Jews of 2025, thousands of years, detached, severed. It's a good question. We don't always feel like we're the same Jews. But friends, look at the hatred and you'll see you're exactly the same Jews. The same venom that came to haunt the Jews 3,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 500 years ago, 200 years ago. It's exactly here to the same group. Why? Because it's the same holiness. Evil is allergic to good. Negativity is threatened by positivity and it tries to hunt down. There's something so holy and powerful about the Jewish people that evil is driven crazy and wants to hunt it down. They used to say in the shtetl, tell me who your enemy is and I'll tell you who you are. I look at the Jewish people and I say, tell me who your enemy is and I'll tell you who you are. Who's your enemy? Pharaoh, Haman, Nebuchadnezzar, Titus, Vespasian, Turcomedes, Khmelnytsky, Eichmann, Rosenberg, Himmler, Stalin, Arafat, Bin Laden, Nasrallah, Sinwar, Rouhani, Ahmadinejad. These are your enemies? Wow, you guys are doing something right. If Hitler and Stalin and Pharaoh and Haman hate you, you are doing something right. If people who love beheading children and women can hate you so much, what are you doing right? And the answer is, as the Rebbe taught, every Jew is an ambassador of God in the world. By our very presence, we bring holiness to the world, and evil feels it. It's exactly the same as it was when the Exodus of Egypt happened. What does this teach us today? Know who you are. Respect yourself as an individual, as part of a collective. And the more we blow shofar from our narrow side, the louder, broader will it resonate, will it be heard in the entire universe, in the entire world. You know, my dearest friends, there was another paradox in the world of the Rebbe, the paradox of exile and redemption. One of the most frequent things I heard from him is we are in the last generation of exile and the first generation of redemption. But which one is it? And for the Rebbe, that paradox was as real as it was visceral. Because whenever you're in that link, whenever you're in that limbo state, in between, you can feel both. You can feel the impact of exile, you can feel the impact of redemption. In that sense, our era in Jewish history is unique and unprecedented. Because after Mashiach comes speedily in our days, may it be now, it's going to be full redemption. Some years ago, it was full exile. Now, we're in between. We experience the flavors of redemption. And yet, we still experience the agony and horror of exile, and therefore, we have to choose redemption because it's not yet completely natural and organic. It's like when you come to a house Friday afternoon, you could smell the kugel. You could smell the chicken in the kitchen. The Rebbe said, our time is Friday afternoon. It's that state between the chaos of Friday and the tranquility of Saturday, of Shabbat. And what that means in a very practical way is that the Rebbe lived in two worlds simultaneously. And it's not easy to live in these two worlds. And I want to describe to you these two worlds. On one hand, the Rebbe had his 2 feet grounded, Sula Mutzav Arza. He lived among his people, with his people. He felt their pain and knew their agony. He himself was not indifferent to his own pain and so many others. He came from that generation that suffered so much. Loss of many members of his own family, to the Nazis, to the Russians, and himself had a very difficult life. Besides that, being a leader, he absorbed and listened and heard the pain of so many. That was one side of the Rebbe, and it was very real. I watched him cry. I watched him weep. I watched him sob when he spoke of exile, when he spoke of murder of young men and women in Israel, when he spoke of the long exile, when he spoke of the trauma of the Jewish people, and when he spoke about the individual suffering of so many on earth. You could see how it affected him. You could see the empathy. In fact, one of his followers, whom I know, his name is Rabbi Chanan, bought the Rebbe an envelope opener. The Rebbe used to receive between 300 and 600 letters a day and open them all himself. Did you ever try opening 600 envelopes a day yourself? Try 20. He wouldn't let his secretaries open them because they're private. So one of his disciples brought him an envelope opener. You know, those envelope openers. He gave it back. He said it makes too much noise. So the guy told me he found a silent one. It was expensive. It was hard to find. He found a silent model and he sent it into the Rebbe. And the Rebbe returned it. This was a disappointment. What happened now? And the Rebbe explained. And the Rebbe said, when Jews seal their envelope in which they put their letter that they want to send to me, they seal their envelopes in different ways. Some people seal their envelopes with their saliva. Some people seal their envelopes with glue, with scotch tape, with a staple. And some people seal their envelopes with their tears. How can I open up with a machine that which a person sealed with his or her tears? I must open up the envelope with my finger so I can detect those tears. That's what holding space looks like. That's what being present looks like. I can't do that with a machine. Opening the envelope itself was already the beginning of the connection, the beginning of the answer, even before reading the letter. That was one side of the Rebbe. The Rebbe also had another side. And it's going to be a little hard maybe to understand, but this is the entire paradox of life. And that is, he had a very, very deep bliss and joy that animated him 24/7. In fact, there was an old chassid, his name was Rebbe Golden, and in 1952, when the Rebbe just became Rebbe, he wrote a letter to France to describe the personality of the Rebbe, and he wrote in Yiddish, a freilicher zubrochener ish eliki, a joyous yet broken man of God. What does it mean to be joyous yet broken, or broken yet joyous? It's paradox. On one hand, we live in a world of pain, of blood, of tears, of agony, of suffering, individually, collectively. Every person here in this room, many of you know pain. You know it from your own lives. Loss, wounds, emotional, psychological, financial, physical, spiritual, either of yourself or your loved ones. None of us in this world can escape the realities of pain. And when you're a Jewish leader, it's not just your own pain and your family pain. You feel the pain of the world. You feel the pain of history. That's one truth. The Rebbe also lived in another truth. This truth was the truth that the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidic movement, always spoke about. And this became one of the deepest teachings of the Rebbe. It's known in Kabbalah as 3 words from the Chumash, from the Bible. Ein oid milvada. Ein oid milvada means that we can tune in to the frequency of oneness. There is a space in reality where there is coherence, where everything is as perfect as can be, because ultimately there's nothing outside of God. God creates the world every single moment, and all of reality is subsumed in the oneness of God. Yes, our egos don't see that. Ego stands for easing God out. Throughout our life, we create coping mechanisms, survival skills to substitute for the oneness of God. But as the great Hasidic masters taught, and this was one of the highlights of the Rebbe's teachings, there's no happiness in the world that you'll ever achieve besides if you go back to your own source. And your own source is the divine energy that flows through you. Every moment I have to make a choice. Do I live in God's oneness, or do I live in the world of the ego? The world of the ego is the world where I have to survive as a lonely, broken, individual person detached from God. It's a world in which I need validation. It's a world in which I need attention. It's a world in which I need to please people. It's a world in which I need to manufacture a self that will cope in a world of sharks to be able to survive as best as I can. What the Tanya calls living with my animal consciousness that simply needs to survive. And how does it survive? From the age of 1, probably, it develops a strategy of mechanisms through which it can survive in a difficult and challenging world as an independent person, and I could walk around my entire life living as a shell of a person, trying to navigate my way, staying small, safe, and in control, making sure that I get the attention, validation, love that I need in order to be able to make me feel good. But I'm completely divorced from my own life force. I could live like this my entire life. I can develop great skills of doing this. Everybody in their own way. One person becomes a celebrity, the other person becomes a genius, the other person makes money, the other person creates their own little hub and gets their attention and validation, but it's torturous because I'm always looking for another distraction, for another addiction, whether it's my binging or my website or my computer, whether it's my phone or my job, always looking for another distraction. Or we have another choice. The other choice is to surrender everything. You surrender everything and you say, I am in the presence of an infinite reality of love called Hashem. This is the frequency of surrender, love, trust, faith. I let go of everything and I say to God, I'm yours. I'm your conduit. And I know that the entire world is yours. What is Mashiach? Mashiach is when everybody in their own consciousness will experience that life is as perfect as it can be because everything is really a manifestation of God. The moment we can all experience that way, that's exactly what happens. That's exactly what becomes. The tension of exile and redemption is, it's so hard to see it. We constantly have to choose it. The Rebbe lived right there in that paradox. On one hand, profound pain. On the other hand, infinite joy. I remember one Passover, one Pesach. It was the first night of Passover. The Rebbe would give matzah to a few people who worked in his house and his secretaries, like 10, 15 people. My father was a journalist, and the Rebbe had a close relationship with him, so he would give him matzah the first night of Passover before the Seder. As a kid, I went in with him, even though I wasn't supposed to, but I smuggled myself in to get a piece of matzah. The Rebbe had a custom that adults, he gave a whole matzah. Children, always a broken piece of matzah. Now, whenever you get a pound of shmura matzah, it's never a problem to find broken pieces of matzah, right? It's usually a challenge to find a whole matzah, even though you paid, I don't know how much for that pound. But broken matzahs are galore. They're just always broken. If you find a whole one, you're like a shtickle miracle worker. Anyway, it came my turn. I was a kid. I still remember I'm standing in front of the Rebbe's room the night of Passover. His face was glowing like an angel. He had a pound of matzah in front of him in a brown bag. And he looked And all the years, he just saw a broken matzah he would give me. But the matzah in front of him was a whole matzah. Okay, he picked it up to get the broken matzah. The second one was also whole. He picked up both of them to go to the third. The third one was also whole. I kid you not, he went through matzah by matzah by matzah. Every one was whole. This was like a miracle that I never saw in my life. He went to the bottom of the pile. Like the bottom, the last one was whole. You know what he did after that? I still remember, he took both of his hands, one hand on the top, one hand on the bottom, and he turned over. He turned over the whole pile and checked it again. Checked it again, but this time from the other direction because he turned it all over. And he went down. What am I thinking? I'm thinking, Lubavitcher Rebbe, if you don't tell, I won't tell. Give me a whole matzah. Nobody is going to know. I'll hide it in my thing. Don't worry. I'm not going to tell on you. Nobody's going to get you in trouble for giving. And I was already excited because I knew the Rebbe won't want to break a matzah. I knew that. Nobody likes to break a matzah. It's not yachatz. When you got to break, you got to break. But you don't go break a matzah. So I was already excited that I'm going to get my whole matzah. I'm like, okay, I won't tell anybody. I won't get anybody else jealous. He finishes, and the Rebbe sees there's no broken matzah. Mamish, no broken matzah. It was, I don't remember ever being there so long because this took a while. And what happened was, I see the Rebbe thinking what to do, so to speak. I'm thinking, just give me a whole matzah, nothing is going to happen. He starts walking away back into his room to go bring another box of matzahs to find his broken matzah. He starts walking away, and then I see that the Rebbe, so to speak, changed his mind and he walked back. He walked back, and begrudgingly, he took the matzah. He didn't take the first one. He picked up the first one. He took the second one. He broke it. He didn't do it initially. I saw it was with a little hesitation. If I could read it correctly, maybe I'm wrong. That's what it seemed to me. He broke it. He gave me the broken piece. He looked me in the eyes. And he said in Yiddish, "Hakosherin und afreilich in Pesach." A kosher and a happy Passover. As you know, life moves on. Truthfully, I forgot the story. I forgot the story. Years and years passed. And I was once reading an email. I get a lot of emails from people around the world. And the emails are usually not telling me that they won the lottery or they want to share it with me. It's usually different types of emails. And I got an email, people talk about abuse and crazy traumas and stories of all types. I'm not going to get graphic here and detailed. You could use your imagination. My wife comes into the room and she comes over to the screen and she reads the email. And she's like, I don't know how you do this. And why do people think that you know the answers? And of course, my wife starts explaining to me how much I don't know the answers, as a wife knows how to explain to her husband the depth of his ignorance. And you should just tell people you don't know. It was a really, really frightening situation and difficult situation. And I sat back and I thought, Ribono Shel Olam, the master of the universe, what am I supposed to do to help this girl? What am I supposed to do? And sometimes people reach out, and you know this might be the last letter before they take their life. This may be the last hope. I don't know, but I've heard feedback. So today I do know. So I'm extremely careful. I try to be, with God's grace, sensitive, empathetic, as best as I can. I'm sure I've made mistakes. And I'm thinking to myself, what am I supposed to tell her? And then, you know, sometimes God just puts a thought into your mind. I have a flashback. I'm a child, standing in front of the Rebbe, watching him debate if he should give a whole matzah, if he should go get a new box, and he decides to break the matzah. And then I asked myself, why didn't he give me a whole matzah? Okay, he usually gave children a broken piece, but there were no broken pieces. Give me a whole matzah. What's going to happen? I don't know the answer. I could speculate. Perhaps it was a blessing that I should be able to find my second half, my dearest wife. Because to be able to find your second half, you have to remember that you are a half. Number one. Perhaps it was a blessing or a message or empowerment to always remember you're half, you're never whole. Machatzit hashekel. Humble, 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 humble. The moment we become whole, we are lost. When we remain half, we can be open, vulnerable, and authentic. But then I thought, maybe there was a deeper message. Maybe the Lubavitcher Rebbe, with his holy gaze, was sharing with me a message for life. And that is, Young YY, Yosef Yitzchak, that's my name. Don't be afraid of broken matzahs. Don't be afraid of broken places. Don't be afraid of broken people. Don't be afraid of the broken places inside yourself. When you see brokenness, don't run. Don't ignore. Don't repress. Don't suppress. Don't rationalize. Don't justify. Don't cover up. You could look at a broken matzah and hold on to it and embrace it and allow people to sit with it and find the answers from within. And then something else was shared with me, and that is, wait, the matzah really wasn't broken. He broke it. It was actually whole. Isn't that a message too? Remember that beneath the brokenness, there is always wholeness. If God is the conceiver and the creator of the world, if I was right in my answer to you years ago at that Farbrengen, how do you know the world exists? Because the Torah says in the beginning, God created heaven and earth. If heaven and earth really belongs to God, isn't it whole? Isn't it perfect? Aren't you perfect? Isn't your childhood perfect? Isn't your life today perfect? Oh, come on. You know my marriage? You know my husband? You know my wife? You know my mother? You know my father? You know all the Mishagayim I grew up with? It was broken. But something whole was broken, not something broken was broken. God sent down your soul into broken places, but He sent down a whole soul, not a broken soul. The matzah was broken, but it's a whole matzah that was broken. So never be afraid of it. Be present and help people find their wholeness in their brokenness, their redemption in their exile. Because as the Rebbe taught, the word for redemption, the word for exile in Hebrew, Gola is exile. Geula is redemption. It's the same word, just with an aleph. The moment I can surrender to the aleph, to the oneness in exile, the exile becomes redemption. This is not to sugarcoat and cover up pain. On the contrary, it's the ability to be able to cry, to be able to be present, to be able to look at the broken matzah, and to be able to say, and yet deep, deep, deep down here, there's a secret DNA, there's a secret code of wholeness. It's what kept the Jewish people not only alive, but vibrant and strong. It's why the Rebbe lived with one foot in exile, but with his heart and soul in a consciousness of redemption, giving people a choice. You could choose. You choose not to change the circumstances of your life. I can't. I can't change my childhood. I can't change my difficult experiences. I can't change some of the struggles I deal with, whether it's anxiety, whether it's depression, whether it's mental illness, whether it's various psychological, emotional, spiritual, physical wounds, disabilities, circumstances that are very difficult and challenging. What I could do, though, is I can hold on to that broken matzah. I can breathe into the broken matzah. I can deep, deep down know that the broken matzah somehow comes from a whole matzah. This is my journey. This is my mission. And therefore also know in a moment of sobriety and serenity that in a very paradoxical, funny way, it's as perfect as it gets, even if from another perspective, it seems so imperfect. Paradox? Of course. Welcome to the world of truth. Welcome to the world of God. Welcome to the world that the Rebbe embodied. And here I conclude, my friends, with a story I once read or heard from Rabbi Adin Even Yisrael, Rabbi Adin Steinsaltz from Jerusalem, the great author. And he told a story, I guess it's more like a metaphor. There was a tornado. And there was a farmer who came walking around after the tornado to look if there was anything left from any nest. Tornadoes destroy birds' nests. Is there anything left? All the nests were completely obliterated. But he found an eagle's nest, and he saw that there was one egg still intact. It seemed like the egg was not destroyed, and there may be a chick developing. And he took the egg, and he brought it back to his chicken farm, and he put it into the chicken coop. And the chicken, sitting on her eggs for 21 days, did not distinguish between the eagle's egg and her own chicken egg, so she sat on the eagle's egg as well, and indeed, after some time, that egg too hatched. And a little baby chick eagle came out, but the eagle emerged in a chicken coop with a mother, a chicken, with brothers, chickens, sisters, chickens, an environment of chickens, and the eagle believed it was a chicken. And so the eagle lived as a chicken, croaked as a chicken, breathed as a chicken, meditated as a chicken, and kukurikued as a chicken. The eagle walked around with the chickens, beak in the ground, looking for more food and more food. Another bug and another worm, another blade of grass, and another seed. And the eagle, like its brothers and sisters, was and it walked around and around and went back to the coop and out of the coop and back to the coop and out of the coop. And this went on for decades until the eagle was now a ripe old man. And one day, the eagle felt this little itch on its neck. And for the first time in his life, he felt compelled to lift up his head. Chickens don't lift up their head. But this eagle lifted up his head and he looked up. And what did he see? Lo and behold, he saw a beautiful, majestic eagle soaring right above him. Its wings spread broadly and elegantly with majestic drama. It was flying over the horizons. And this old chicken, looking at this eagle, emits a sigh. In Yiddish, they call it a krechts, a groan. And the chickens are there and they say, hey, what are you groaning about? Was krechzest du? What are you sad about? What are you complaining? What's missing? And he says, I wish I was an eagle. I wish I was an eagle. Nobody ever told him that. In many ways, for me, it's what I feel still. When I listen to the Rebbe, when I think of the Rebbe. He understood so well the truth. I could live my entire life as a chicken, even if I'm really an eagle. How many people allow their potential to die in utero, spiritually? It's not their fault. It's my coping mechanism. If I learned my entire life I was a chicken, I have to squabble and fight with other chickens over every piece of food. Flight is not even an option. What am I supposed to do? I live as a chicken and I make the best out of it, and then I may even become a famous chicken. Isn't that great? I may get so many likes on Facebook, who knows how many subscribers on YouTube, who knows how well on social media, and yet I never learned the taste of flight. And I could live my entire life in that paradigm, locked up, fearful, self-conscious, egotistical, full of anxiety, full of dread, overwhelmed, trying to please people, impress people, running from one distraction to another distraction, to another distraction, to another distraction, and I never learned about the divine infinity vibrating, cruising through my veins. I never did. And the Rebbe taught, you don't have to wait till the end of your life. When you see another eagle and say, I wish I was an eagle. I could become that eagle now. I may need help. I may need some time. I need a support system. Maybe I need some healing modalities. But it's something that I could sigh. But then I realized something else. There was a deeper message here. The chickens never sighed about the fact that they weren't eagles. You know that? Because chickens don't mind that they're not eagles. It's eagles who mind if they're not eagles. The reason you have anxiety and your dog does not have anxiety, unless Seattle has become like Los Angeles, I don't know. The reason you have anxiety is because you miss God, because you're infinite. We miss being an eagle because we're eagles. We weren't made to be chickens. But then I learned something else. You know how the eagle learned he was an eagle? Not by somebody coming in and saying, you shaita, you idiot, you moron, you shagets, you behemoth. You're not a chicken, you're an eagle. You know how we learned that he was an eagle? Somebody modeled it for him. He watched an eagle and he said, that's what it looks like. That's what we need to give people. You don't have to tell people what to do. Model for them what it looks like to be an eagle. You want your kids to be happy? Don't tell them to be happy. Become happy yourself. Oh, that's harder. No, I'm miserable. I want my kids to be happy. Every Jew I know, I'm miserable, but I want my kids to be happy. Doesn't work that way, friends. You want your kids to be happy? Become happy. Me, I'm miserable. And that's what your kids are going to do. They're going to say, I'm going to make my kids happy. It's like somebody said, in our house, we always ate leftovers. We're still looking for the original meal. Everything is the kids for the kids, the kids for the kids. When does it stop? I want to see that kid for which 4,000 years of Jews are traumatized to make that kid happy because I want to kill him right now. Nobody is allowed to live and breathe because that kid. The Rebbe said, well, you are that kid. You are that kid. Life is here, right now. Einoid Malvada. Start breathing, start dancing, start celebrating. Live with an open heart. When you live with an open heart, you can embrace broken matzahs because you know that they come from whole matzahs. When we model for people what it means to be an eagle, they learn it in their bones, in their kishkis, in their nervous system. Not through words. Look who's talking. And so, my dearest friends, holy brothers and sisters, as we celebrate here tonight, one man, one nation, one people, with one heart, the power of Jewish pride and resilience. It's a moment to reflect on the unique consciousness of this generation. God has upgraded consciousness in a very expedited way. I didn't think history would unravel so fast as we're talking. Today, if you miss the news for a week, you come back, it looks like 1,000 years have passed, right? The world changes in a day faster than it changed in the last 500 years. You miss one, especially with Trump. I mean, every few minutes is like another interesting thing going on, right? Interesting, even 2 in the morning. I schlaf nicht. But God is upgrading consciousness in a very, very expedited way. We need to catch up. We need to open consciousness. Upgrading consciousness is to be able to feel and breathe that heart that unites the people, that heart that unites us and allows us to believe and experience a consciousness of love, faith, trust, and redemption, even in the midst of exile. And may we experience that complete awakening of consciousness here and now. Thank you very, very much.
This class is brought to you by theyeshiva.net. Please help us continue the classes. Make even a small contribution at www.theyeshiva.net/donate.